Welcome back to the Versatile PC channel. In today's video, we're going to be looking at CPU scaling when it comes to the AM5 X3D CPUs. In today's video, we look at 3 different games. We did originally 4, but the other one was so GPU limited that the performance difference between the different CPUs was not evident. It just kind of became a GPU benchmark at that point, and it wasn't really a game that we needed to do GPU benchmarking for CPU GPU scaling. So in today's video, we used the Black Myth Wukong built-in benchmark. We used the Marvel Rivals built-in benchmark and the Call of Duty Black Ops 6 built-in benchmark. For the CPUs, we used the 7600 X3D. In the United States, it is a Micro Center exclusive still, but it is a very affordable X3D CPU relative to the 9800 X3D and 7800 X3D. We also used the 7800 X3D and the 9800 X3D as well. We tested at 1080p low settings on all the games. We tested at 1440p low settings on all the games and 4K low settings in all the games. Trying to put as low in the CPUs we possibly could by pushing the most amount of frame rate as we possibly could. The graphics card we used was the RTX 5070 Ti and the Radeon RX 9070 XT. I do not currently have a 5090. I would love to have used a 5090 for this video, but I don't have a 5090, I don't have a 4090. So these are the highest 2 current gen graphics cards that I do have, in the 9070 XT and the 5070 Ti. So that's the 2 highest ones we have. First up, we will look at Black Myth Wukong at 1080p. Black Myth Wukong at 1080p, the 7600 X3D using the 5070 Ti was able to render 219 average FPS, and the 9070 XT using the 7600 X3D did 218 average FPS, so pretty much identical performance there. Using the 7800 X3D, the 5070 Ti did 242 average FPS, the 7800 X3D and the 9070 XT did 240 average FPS. Again, pretty much identical performance within run-to-run variance. CPU definitely seemed to be more of a limiting factor here in the built-in benchmark. Now there is parts of Black Myth Wukong that is very more GPU demanding, but in the benchmark it definitely seems to be more CPU demanding. Then the 9800 X3D with the 5070 Ti was able to do 272 average FPS, and the 9800 X3D 9070 combo did 300 average FPS. You start to notice this when it gets to the 9800 X3D as we go through the resolutions here, that the 9800 X3D and the 5070 Ti performs worse than the 9800 X3D and the 9070 XT for some odd reason, while the 7800 X3D and the 7600 X3D seem to keep the performance similar. So let's go to 1440p. So again, the 1440p results, you get 7600 X3D at 5070 Ti at 217 average FPS, and the 7600 X3D at 9070 XT. So basically, again, we're still kind of more CPU limited, because the performance didn't change much between 1440p and 1080p using the 7600 X3D. However, with the 7800 X3D, we do see a little bit of a performance hit, but not too bad of a performance hit. It's still heavily CPU limited here. 7800 X3D did 357, 7800 X3D and 5070 Ti did about 238 average FPS. 7800 X3D and 9070 XT did about 238 as well for average FPS. So again, still more CPU demanding, more CPU limited. And then 9800 X3D and 5070 Ti did 255 average FPS, while the 9800 X3D and 9070 XT did 286 average FPS. So again, you see this margin kind of increase with the 9800 X3 at all resolutions. So we'll see at 4K again that there's still a gap here with the 9800 X3D and 5070 Ti. In the 9800 X3D and 9070 at the very bottom, you start to see a gap here, but with the 7600 X3D at 4K, we're still pretty much CPU limited here. 9600 X3D and the 5070 Ti did about 215 average FPS. The 7600 X3D and 9070 XT did about 214. The 7800 X3D and 5070 Ti did about 230 average FPS. The 7800 X3D and 9070 XT did about 233. So we're still primarily CPU demanding here, or bound here. Starting to get more GPU bound when it comes to the 7800 X3D. And then the 9800 X3D is where we're going to see definitely more CPU bounding issues. So the 9800 X3D and the 5070 Ti did 222 average FPS, and the 9800 X3D and 9070 XT did about 247 average FPS, which again would be GPU limitations, because your CPU performance throughput should not change with the resolution that much. Maybe change a couple percentage due to run-to-run variance, but it should not change overall too much. So let's go ahead and go on to the second game we use, which is Marvel Rivals, using the built-in benchmark. We will look at CPU scaling in the future with the NVIDIA and Radeon GPUs. being CPU limited. However, we know that in Marvel Rivals, the NVIDIA GPU tends to perform better than the 9070 XT. The 5070 Ti tends to perform better, a little bit of a favor. So let's go ahead and look at the 7600 X3D and the 5070 Ti. Averaged about 249 average FPS in the built-in benchmark. The 7600 X3D 9070 XT did about 245 average FPS. So again, more CPU limitation there, I believe. So we will look at, yeah, should be pretty much CPU limitations in the majority of the benchmark. There's some parts of the benchmark that is GPU demanding, so the average FPS will be kind of limited. So we change to that. The 7800 X3D and 5070 Ti at 1080p did about 252. The 7800 X3D 9070 XT did about 266 average FPS, which I don't understand why that was a little bit higher. Maybe a game logic issue or something like that in this one, but not too far of a difference. The 9800 X3D and 5070 Ti did about 278 average FPS, and the 9800 X3D 9070 XT did about 273 average FPS. So again, so let's go ahead and jump up to 1440p. This is now we're going to become a lot more GPU limited. That's why all these numbers look pretty much the same. So our 7600 X3D 5070 Ti did about 211. 7800 X3D or 7600 X3D 9070 XT did about 210. 7800 X3D 5070 Ti did about 213. 7800 X3D with the 9070 XT did about 211. So again, we're basically CPU demanding. So at 1440p in Marvel Rivals at low settings, we are basically GPU limited. So again, we're going to see the same results at 4K, pretty much the same average FPS across the board, with the NVIDIA GPU being slightly faster. Slightly faster. So then let's go into our Black Ops 6 built-in benchmark. Now this one has 2 lines per CPU GPU combo, because the game has a cap inside the benchmark, but about 250 average FPS. So we already hit the cap, as you can see throughout all of these CPU GPU combos we have listed here. We've hit the cap. However, it also offers in the game itself, I will show on screen right now, in the ending scene that shows you the performance kind of results, it has a GPU rendering how many frames the GPU can, or the CPU. There's a GPU and CPU rendering option or data points available. So these bottom lines right here are the CPU rendering numbers. So the 7600 X3D using the 5070 Ti was able to render 306 FPS. Using the 7600 X3D with the 9070 XT, the CPU was able to render 333 average FPS. So again, back to the CPU scaling issue with the NVIDIA GPUs, this makes sense. Obviously, the performance we will see with the Radeon GPUs in Black Ops 6 do perform better than the NVIDIA counterparts. But again, you see that the CPU, all these CPUs with the Radeon GPU is able to perform better. So at 7800 X3D with the 5070 Ti, the CPU is able to render 319 FPS average. The 7800 X3D 9070 XT was able to throughput 354 average FPS, so there's a pretty big gap there. And then 9900 X3D using the NVIDIA GPU was able to do 354 average FPS through the CPU. The CPU in the 9800 X3D at 9070 XT at 1080p was able to throughput 392 average FPS, which again you'll see similar results at 4K or at 1440p. The CPU now we start to become more GPU limited here, with the results pretty much being the same across the board. 7800 X3D, 7600 X3D, and 9800 X3D with the 5070 Ti renders about 208 average FPS, 207, 206, basically the same. The 7800 X3D, 7600 X3D, and 9800 X3D with the 9070 XT is able to perform with 236, 238, 236, about 236 average FPS, with the CPUs being similar to performance at 1080p that they were at 1440p, with the Radeon GPU with the X3D CPU combo performing slightly better, or significantly better in some of these cases. And then at 4K, see similar results again, where it's CPU limited, but again, at 4K, we are GPU limited. We see the 7600 X3D is able to throughput with the NVIDIA GPU 264 average FPS, but with the 7600 X3D and the 9070 combo, we're able to throughput 328 average FPS. So that's a huge jump there. I don't understand, but I don't get why. Yeah, it's a little bit, so it's a little bit less for some reason. It seems about the same. I don't know why with 1440p in Black Ops 6 our 7600 X3D performed significantly better. I don't get why that was, but you know, whatever. The 7800 X3D 5070 Ti was able to, again, our result itself using the benchmark was limited. That's what the bright green line is, but the darker green is where the CPU was able to throughput. Alright, so there you have it. There's our results when using 3 different CPUs with 2 different GPUs, using 3 different resolutions in 3 different games, what our performance comes out to. So basically, the higher resolution you go, you become a lot more GPU limited, as most people already know. And at lower resolution, lower settings you go, the more your GPU is able to throughput frames, you will become more CPU demanded or CPU limited. However, even when scaling up your resolution, there's still some CPU performance that is still very heavily into something you should consider. So if you enjoyed this video, please make sure you leave a like, comment other videos you want to see like this in the future. If you like our benchmark videos, or you want to see us do more build videos, whichever. Next up, we will be doing a CPU scaling video using the non-X3D CPUs. So stay tuned for that. That'll come out soon. And if you want to find your way back to the channel ever in the future, make sure you consider subscribing. And I'll see you guys in the next one.